When I regained consciousness, my vision was rotated 90 degrees. Things that should have been vertical were horizontal, like the streetlights sticking from the left to the right, which made me realize that yes, I was lying down. I soon discovered that the left side of my head felt especially warm. Are you awake? The voice of an angel fully brought me out of my daze. What's that squirming under my left ear? Could you lift your head soon, or I'm going to be... Asahina said in a strained voice. I sat up and checked my surroundings. I was sitting on a bench in the park late at night. I was at a loss for words. It would appear that I had been sleeping with my head in Asahina's lap, and since I had been asleep I had no memory of the experience. What a waste. My legs are almost numb. Asahina shyly smiled down at me. I have no idea where she'd gotten changed, but she was wearing the North High sailor uniform instead of her maid outfit. I suppose that she had had enough time to get changed since it appeared to be late in the evening. How long had I been asleep? And yeah, why was I asleep anyway? I didn't want to let you know how we time travel, since it's classified. Are you mad? No way. Absolutely not. If Haruhi had been the one responsible, I would have punched her in the face, but since it's Asahina, I was totally fine with it. In any case, one second I was sitting in a chair in the club room with my eyes closed, and the next thing I knew I was in a park in the dead of night. And this park happened to hold a number of memories for me. This was a park where Nagato wanted me to come that one time. Was this like a mecca for weirdos? I scratched my head. There was something I needed to ask about first. What's the current date and time? Asahina, sitting next to me on the bench, replied, July 7th, 3 years before the date we set off from, around 9 p.m. I think. For real? For real. She had a serious look on her face. That was awfully simple, but I'm not naive enough to take everything she says at face value. I need some kind of confirmation. Maybe I should check the time. I was about to mention this when I suddenly noticed a weight on my left shoulder. I flinched. Asahina's head rested on my shoulder. Sound asleep, Asahina was leaning on me. What exactly does she mean by this? Asahina? No response. Excuse me. Zzz. Zzz. I turned my head about 85 degrees to the left to find Asahina with her lips half parted and breathing softly as she slept. What the what? Rustle, rustle. Out of nowhere, the bushes behind me began to rustle and my heart began to pound. What the what? Is she sound asleep? The person who spoke as she emerged from the dark foliage was another Asahina. Ah, Kyon, good evening. It was the gorgeous version of Asahina. The Asahina who had developed in all sorts of places and was a number of years older than the one sleeping next to me. A young, beautiful woman who retained her adorability despite filling out in a positive way. I'd met her once before. As she walked towards us, she wore the same white blouse and tight deep blue miniskirt she had back then. From this perspective, the adult version of Asahina poked a sleeping Asahina's cheek. I look like a child. Asahina, big, reached her hand out to familiarly touch Asahina Small's sailor uniform. Was this how I looked back then? As I felt Asahina Small so softly breathing on my arm, I could only look up at Asahina Big in a daze without moving a muscle. It was her role to guide you to this point. It is my role to guide you from here on. I stupidly attempted to question the smiling and voluptuous Asahina. What's going on here? I can't give you any details because they're classified, so I can only ask nicely. I turned to look at the snoozing Asahina leaning against me. I put her to sleep. I couldn't allow her to see me. Why? Because I didn't run into myself when I was at this point in time. Reasoning that sort of made sense, but not really. The alluring Asahina winked at me. If you follow those train tracks south, you'll come across a school, a public middle school. I want you to assist the person you find there. Could you go right away? As for the other me, sorry, could you carry her there? She couldn't. She shouldn't weigh very much. She sounds like a villager in some role-playing game. What kind of item will I get in return? What will you get in return? Let's see. The adult version of Asahina tapped her finely shaped chin as she stood deep in thought before smiling knowingly. I can't personally offer you anything. However, you can kiss the me that's sleeping over there, but nothing more. And only while she's asleep, okay? Very attractive terms, enough to make me want to pump my fist. The sight of Asahina sleeping was lovely enough to make me lose control, but that's a bit... It goes against my policy, both mentally and circumstantially. This is when I really start to hate my irrational personality. It's time, I have to go. That's all the advice I get this time? Oh, and please keep me a secret from her. Promise, okay? Want a pinky swear? Asahina Big stuck out her pinky, and I unconsciously hooked mine with hers. We stood there like that for about a minute. Goodbye, Kyon. I'll see you again. And with that bright farewell, Asahina Big walked off into the darkness, disappearing out of sight in no time. She had no trouble leaving this time. Well, I thought to myself, I wonder how much time has passed for the adult Asahina since she's last saw me. It didn't seem like she's changed at all since our previous encounter from when she'd given me that bizarre hint. Perhaps this Asahina was from an earlier time than the previous one. I have no idea. I had no way of knowing. The only thing I did know was that I'd be running into the Asahina from a different time period again. I carried Asahina on my back, and she wasn't exactly light, but at the same time I wouldn't say she was heavy. So she was somewhere in between the two. Naturally, my steps began to slow. I'd be inclined to blame the innocent-looking face that was softly breathing in my ear. The back part of my neck she'd been breathing on was all itchy. I did my best to avoid being seen by any people walking by as I followed the directions of the adult Asahina. I must have walked for approximately 10 minutes through an increasingly uninhabited area. I turned a corner to arrive at my destination. East Middle School, a place I knew as Taniguchi and Haruhi's old school. Speaking of which, a familiar-looking person was clinging to the school gate. I couldn't possibly mistake the small shadow who was attempting to climb the middle gate. Hey! I began having doubts about opening my mouth. The fact that I could recognize this person was quite a mystery if I do say so myself. I could only see this person's back, and she was noticeably shorter. Her straight black hair was at a length that couldn't be classified as long or short. Maybe it was because I couldn't think of any other acquaintances who would be determined to climb over the school gate late at night. What is it? I was finally starting to feel like I had gone back 3 years in time. In fact, I actually had gone back in time. The face that had turned to look at me while she remained clinging to the gate was definitely younger than the face of the SOS Brigade chief I knew, but there was no doubt that those shining eyes belonged to Haruhi. The fact that she was haphazardly dressed in t-shirt and shorts didn't make any difference. At this point, 3 years ago, Haruhi was a first year in middle school. Was she the one Asahina wanted me to assist? Who are you? A pervert? Kidnapper? Awfully suspicious. The hazy glow of the streetlight illuminated the surrounding area. I couldn't read the minute expressions on her face, but the middle school first year Haruhi was obviously glaring at me as though I was a suspicious person. Between her sneaking into the school in the dead of night and my wandering around carrying a sleeping girl on my back, which would be considered more suspicious behavior? There's a question I really don't want to think about. What are you doing here, then? Isn't that obvious? I'm trespassing. You don't have to announce your criminal activities to the world. There are times when you shouldn't be aggressive. Perfect timing. I don't know who you are, but if you've got time, give me a hand, or I'll call the cops. I should be the one calling the cops on you. Still, I made my promise with the other Asahina. But yeah, I go back in time and I still have to deal with Haruhi Suzumiya. Haruhi hopped down from the gate and opened the padlock on the bar. Why do you have the key? I stole it when I had the chance. Piece of cake. That totally makes you a thief. Haruhi slowly slid the metal school gate open and beckoned me inside. I approached the girl, who had about a head shorter than she would be in 3 years, and readjusted my hold on Asahina. As soon as he passed through the main entrance to East Middle School, he would be on the school grounds, and the school building was located beyond. Haruhi began walking across the dark grounds in a diagonal direction. It's a good thing it's dark. She won't get a clear look at my face or Asahina's this way. Certainly, Haruhi had never entertained the notion that she'd run into Asahina and me back during her first year of middle school, so we needed to keep it that way. Haruhi headed straight toward the center of the sports ground, leading me behind the athletic storeroom. a rusty cart, a rickety wheeled field line marker, and a few bags of lime lay piled up on the ground. I took this stuff out of the storeroom earlier this evening and hid them here. Great idea, right? Haruhi bragged as she piled the bags of powder, which appeared to weigh as much as she did, onto the cart and lifted the handle. She looked like a child as she struggled to push the cart along. Guess the first year in middle school might as well be a child. I carefully set the slumbering Asahina against the storeroom wall. Please stay asleep for the time being. I'll take care of it. Hand it over. You take the line marker, I said. Perhaps I shouldn't have acted in such a cooperative way. How did he abuse me in such a frenzy that she'd have worked a rampaging robot to the bone if she'd been given an option? Her personality hadn't changed the least bit. I could see that her inner character didn't mature over the next 3 years. Draw the lines exactly as I tell you to. Yes, I'm talking to you. I have to stand a ways away to supervise your line drawing and make sure you're doing it right. Ah, that spot's crooked. What are you doing? Her ability to scream commands at a high schooler she'd never met before made it clear that Haruhi had always been Haruhi. If this had been my first encounter with this middle school girl, I would have thought she was genuinely dangerous. Before I met Nagato Asahina and Koizumi, at least. There were no run-ins with teachers on the night watch, or police cars showing up after some nearby residents called the cops. For 30 minutes I drew white lines in every direction on the school grounds per Haruhi's instructions. I would never have thought that mysterious message that suddenly appeared on the school grounds had been drawn by me. As I stared in silence at the patterns I had painstakingly drawn, Haruhi walked over next to me and took the field line marker from me. She proceeded to make a number of fine-tuning adjustments by adding a few lines here and there. Say, do you think aliens exist? That came out of nowhere. Why not? Nagito's face popped into my mind. Well, what about time travelers, then? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they had existed. I'd be considered a time traveler myself right now. And espers? Walking all over the place, I'd guess. I recalled the countless number of red lights. Sliders? I haven't met one of those yet. Haruhi tossed the field line marker aside and used her shoulder to wipe the dust off her face. Oh well, I was getting nervous. Don't tell me that I said something wrong. Haruhi looked at me with upturned eyes. That's a North High uniform, right? Sure. What's your name? John Smith. Are you stupid? Let's just say it's my desired pseudonym. Who's that girl? My older sister. She suffers from a erratic sleep disorder. It's a chronic disease. She falls asleep suddenly, so I have to carry her. Haruhi bit her lower lip and turned to the side with a look that said she didn't believe me. Let's change the subject. What is this supposed to be? Can't you tell? It's a message. To whom? Don't tell me it's to Orihime and Hikoboshi. Haruhi looked surprised. How do you know? Well, it's Tanabotel. I just happened to remember someone doing something similar. Huh. I'd love to meet that person. There's someone like that at North High? Sure. You're the only person now, and in the future, who will ever be like that. North High, huh? Haruhi murmured as she appeared to contemplate something. After staying as silent as a rock for a period of time, she abruptly turned around. I'm going home. I accomplished my objective. See ya. And then she stomped off. She didn't even thank me for helping her. Extremely rude behavior, but that's what I'd expect from Haruhi. And she never told me her name either. Though that works out better for me, I'd say. I couldn't stay in this place forever, so I attempted to wake Asahina up. This was after I had returned the cart and the lime stolen by Haruhi to the spot behind the storeroom. The sight of Asahina sleeping like a kitten was enough to make me lose control, but I resisted those urges and lightly shook her shoulder. What? Once Asahina had opened her eyes, she began looking all around. What? She stood up. Where am I? What, how, when are we right now? How am I supposed to respond? As I racked my brain for an answer, Asahina emitted a short gasp before staggering. Even in the darkness I could tell that her face had turned pale. Asahina began searching herself with both hands. My TPDD is gone. It's gone. Asahina looked like she was about to cry. Soon enough she really was crying. She looked like a little girl as she cried with her head in her hands. but it appeared this wasn't the time to be in high spirits. What's a TPDD? That would be considered classified. It's kind of like a time machine. That's what I used to come to this time. And I can't find it anywhere. We can't return to our original time without it. Oh, why is it gone? I don't know. It should have been impossible to lose, yet I lost it. I recalled the other Asahina touching this one's body. Maybe someone will come to save us. That's impossible, she sobbed. Asahina began explaining as she continued to sniffle. Established events on a time plane were supposed to be predetermined, so if a TVDD were to exist, it would be on her person. The fact that it was gone would be an established event, which means that its absence had been predetermined, and yeah, I don't get it. So in other words, what's gonna happen to us? She sobbed. In other words, we're stuck. We'll be stranded on this time plane 3 years in the past, unable to return to our original space-time. We're in big trouble, was how I felt in my heart, but I didn't feel nervous at all. The adult Asahina hadn't given me any particular warnings about this situation. She was probably the one who swiped the TPDD or whatever and created the current predicament. I presume that Asahina Big came to the past for that very purpose. An established event, right? From the perspective of Asahina, who came from farther in the future than this Asahina, was predetermined. I looked away from the sobbing Asahina to glance across the school grounds. The baffling jumble of white lines designed by Haruhi and drawn by me sprawled across the field. The East Middle School staff and students, who had no idea what transpired, would probably find this creepy when they showed up tomorrow. I'll just have to pray there aren't any aliens out there who would consider this an insult. And that's when I had a sudden revelation. After all, it had been dark. The only lighting in the school was provided by a few flickering streetlights, and a mess of white lines had been large in scale, so I couldn't tell what the whole thing looked like until it was a fair distance away, which is why it took me so long to notice. I pulled the card Nagato had given me out of my pocket, the one with number of intelligible figures on it. There might be a way, I said, as Asahina looked at me in tears. I continued to stare at the card. The drawings on that card were exactly the same as the ones Haruhi and I had scribbled all over the school grounds. After leaving East Middle in a hurry, we came to a stop in front of a fancy apartment in front of the station. Is this Nagato's home? Yes, I never heard any specific details about how long she'd been on Earth, but knowing her, she would have been on this world 3 years ago. Probably. I pressed the button for room 708 on the intercom at the apartment's entrance. There was a buzzing sound to let us know somebody had picked up on the other side. I could feel the warmth of the trembling Asahina's hands through my sleeve as I spoke into the mic. Is this Yuki Nagato's residence? Silence was a response to the intercom. How should I put this? Would it help if I were to say that I'm an acquaintance of Haruhi Suzumiya? I could feel the chilling presence on the other side of the intercom. There was a brief period of silence. Then, come in. There was a click as the door unlocked. I got into the elevator with the nervous Asahina in tow. We rode it to the 7th floor as our destination was room 708, the one I'd previously visited while in the future. As soon as I rang the doorbell, the door opened, albeit slowly. Yuki Nagato stood inside. This suddenly felt surreal. Had Asahina and I actually traveled to the past? I had to wonder because Nagato looked exactly the same. The fact that she was wearing a North High uniform, the way she impassively stared at me, and even her inorganic appearance, which seemingly had no body warmth or presence, added to the impression that she was exactly the same as Nagato I knew. However, there was something that this Nagato had that the more recent one didn't, the glasses she'd been wearing when I first met her. The glasses Nagato had worn before she stopped being a glasses girl at some point were sitting on this Nagato's face. Yo, I said as I raised one hand and gave a friendly smile. Nagato, as always, showed no expression on her face. Asahina was trembling as she hid behind me. Can we step inside? Nagato silently walked into the room. I took that as a yes and entered with Asahina. We took off our shoes and headed toward the living room. The room was as empty as it would be in 3 years. Nagato stood still, waiting for us to enter the room. I had no choice but to remain standing as I attempted to explain our situation. Where do I even begin? From the first day of school when I met Haruhi? That'll take a while. I gave her a general rundown, abridging various spots. I must have spoken for 5 whole minutes as she impassively stared at me through her glasses. A summary of Haruhi's story that lacks any real point if I do say so myself. And so, the you from 3 years later gave this to me. Nagato scrutinized the card I presented without batting an eye and traced her finger over the weird characters. Kind of looked like she was reading a barcode. Understood. Nagato simply nodded. Seriously? Wait, hold on. There is something else that bothered me. I put my hand on my forehead as I did some thinking. I've known Nagato for a while now, but 3 years ago, today for you. So, in other words, the present you. Today would have been the first time you met us, right? I have to admit, I had no idea what I was saying. Nevertheless, Nagato responded as the edges of her glasses flashed. In a calm and indifferent voice, she answered, yes. And so, requesting permission to access the memory corresponding my time-divergent variant, I've downloaded reversible border regression data. No idea what you're talking about. The me in 3 years and the me in this time are the same person. So, of course you're the same person. That doesn't mean the Nagato from 3 years ago would share memories with the Nagato from 3 years later. We do now. How? We had synchronized. Yeah, I don't get it. Nagato removed her glasses without any further response. She looked up at me with her emotionless eyes and blinked. That was definitely the familiar face of the book-living girl, the Yuki Nagato I remembered. Why are you wearing a North High uniform? Did you already enroll? I have not. I am currently in standby mode. Standby? You're going to stand by for 3 whole years? Yes. That'll take a world of patience. Won't you be bored? But Nagato shook her head. That is my role. She stared directly at me with clear eyes. There is more than one method of time travel. Nagato spoke in a flat voice. The TPDD is merely a device for controlling time, both unreliable and primitive. There are a number of theories concerning the process of movement through the time continuum. Asahina squeezed my hand again. What exactly do you... While transportation of organic life forms is conducted with the TPDD, noise may occur. We believe it to be imperfect. By we, she means the data overmind, right? You're capable of perfect time travel? The process does not matter. The transfer of identical data suffices. Going from the present to the past or to the future, huh? If Asahina can do it, maybe Nagato can do it too. I assume that Nagato is the one with the excess abundance of power. In fact, after doing some comparing to Nagato and Koizumi, I'm starting to suspect that Asahina is the one who really has no idea what's going on. That's nice and all. I interrupted Asahina and Nagato, but now isn't the time to be discussing the finer points of time travel. We need to figure out how Asahina and I are going to get back to the future 3 years later. However, Nagato simply responded, It is possible. She then stood and opened the sliding door that led to the room next to the living room. Here. It was a Japanese-style room with tatami flooring. In fact, the room was completely empty except for the tatami mats, which is what you would expect from Nagato. But why were we being shown into this guest room? Could there be a time machine hidden in here? As I wondered, Nagato removed a futon from the closet and splattered it on the floor. Then a second one. I'm pretty sure I've got the wrong idea, but are you telling us to sleep here? Nagato was still carrying a futon, turned to look at me. I could see Asahina and myself reflected in her amethyst eyes. Yes. I glanced next to me to find Asahina fidgeting, with her face completely red. That's how I had expected her to react. But Nagato didn't seem to care. Sleep. Don't be so direct. Just sleep and nothing else. Well, that was a plan. In any case, Asahina and I looked at each other uncertainly. Asahina's face was bright red while I just shrugged. We had no choice but to rely on Nagato in this case. If she's telling us to sleep, then that's what we'll do. Just hope it's as simple as waking up in the morning we find ourselves back in our world. Nagato reached toward the switch on the fluorescent lamp next to the wall. Then she muttered something. I was wondering if she was saying good night when the light disappeared with a click. It appeared that I had no choice but to sleep, so I pulled the covers over myself. And the next thing I knew, the light turned on. The fluorescent lamp made clicking sounds as it flickered and stabilized. Huh? Something feels wrong here. It is still dark outside. As I sat up, Asahina also woke up, clutching the edge of her blanket. The expression in her lovely childlike face was one of bewilderment. She looked at me questioningly, but naturally I had no answers. Nagato was standing there. She had her hand on the light switch just like before. It didn't seem like Nagato's face. I could feel some emotion as I stared at the pale face, like she had something she wanted to say but was unable to because of conflicting interests. It was the slightest expression of emotion that couldn't be perceived without being accustomed to her poker face for a long period of time, though I couldn't be sure that I wasn't just imagining things. I heard someone suddenly inhale right next to me to find Asahina fiddling with the digital watch on her right wrist. Huh? No way. What, really? I glanced at her wristwatch. Don't tell me that thing's a TPDD. It isn't. This is just an atomic watch. One of those watches that synchronizes with the atomic clock through radio waves, huh? Asahina smiled cheerfully as she continued. It's wonderful. We've returned. It's just past 9 p.m. on July 7th, the day we departed. I'm so relieved. Whew. She sounded like the world had just been lifted off her shoulders. The Nagato standing at the entrance was our Nagato. If you were going to differentiate between them by saying one was bespectacled and this one wasn't, this one would be the latter. The Yuki Nagato had softened just a little bit. I could tell after seeing how she was 3 years ago. The Nagato before me now has definitely changed from the Nagato I met in the literary club room when Haruhi dragged me there. I'm guessing it was so slight that she couldn't tell. But how? Asahina asked in a daze. Nagato responded in a flat voice. I froze liquefied data within the selected space-time and unfroze the data once there were corresponding points from an already known space-time continuum. Was that even comprehensible? After a brief pause, she added, which would be now. Asahina attempted to stand before falling to her knees. You couldn't have. Impossible. How could you? Nagato, you... Nagato remained silent. What do you mean? I asked. Nagato stopped time. She probably stopped time for the whole room we were in, for 3 whole years. And then at this time today she unfroze us. Yes, Nagato confirmed. That's unbelievable. She stopped time. Whoa. Asahina sighed as she remained bent over. That's when I thought of something. It appeared we had safely returned in our time 3 years later. After seeing Asahina's reaction, that was certain. She's incapable of hiding anything. Which is fine. The theory behind her return from 3 years ago involves stopping time. I can believe that. I have developed enough tolerance to accept just about anything at this point. That's fine too. Just fine and dandy. But this wasn't my first visit to Nagato's home. I'd been invited inside just a little over a month ago. But I'd stayed in the living room the whole time and never entered the guest room. I didn't even know about its existence. Which means, what does it mean? I looked over at Nagato. Nagato looked back at me. So basically, when I visited this place to hear her crazy spiel, another me had been sleeping in the next room. What the hell? Isn't that what this means? Yes, Nagato replied. I felt dizzy. Hey, so in other words, you already knew everything back then? About me? About what happened today? Yes. From my perspective, my first meeting with Nagato had been on that day in the season of newly green leaves when Haruhi came up with the idea of establishing the SOS Brigade. However, Nagato had met me earlier, on Tanabata, 3 years ago. As far as I was concerned, that meeting had just occurred a moment ago, but 3 years had passed since. I'm going to go insane. Asahina and I stood in a daze together. I know that Nagato is capable of many things, but I never would have dreamed that she could stop time. Doesn't that make her invincible?